Hi, welcome back to the Sciencing and Engineering Teacher Talk. We are so happy to have Maddie Schepper here. Maddie is a second grade teacher at Berton Elementary School, and she's been working with Donnell Hogan on this wonderful project to develop an engineering design project for her second grade students. Maddie loves project-based learning and she loves student-led learning. And she's going to present her project with us today that she did with her class. So, Maddie, welcome. Can you give us a quick overview of this project?
Absolutely. Well, we really just jumped right into it and had the students become engineers. And what we first had to do is define what an engineer was. And so there's many different types of engineers. We listed off a bunch of examples, but we really focused in on aerospace engineers in the beginning. So we had our students come up with a design for the best glider in the world, basically. And we told them that aerospace engineers are, they create and test prototypes to make sure that their project, whatever they're working on, is functioning according to their design. And so we gave them this challenge to come up with the best glider. And with the materials that were given, they came up with typical, like a typical design where the glider's wings are out like this. And,
Right.
we told them that, it's going to be the best one yet. We really hyped it up, made it really exciting, and they make their glider and they go off and test it out, and it's really not that great at all. They observe that it flies straight down into the ground, or it doesn't fly far at all. And so then we told them that, well, part of being an engineer is being able to develop all of these different modifications, going back and trying something new. And
Right.
so with a little bit of guidance, we offered the students with this modification of turning the plane's wings into loops. And so we kind of set them off and to do that. And they came back to us and made their new observations of, okay, it flew a lot farther. That's great. How can we make it better? And better was, how far can we make it fly? We wanted to see how far it could fly. And so, after that first session was done, the students really focused in on making their own modifications, adding new parts to their gliders, and
Right.
coming back to us and reporting what they found. And so
So
that really kind of hit this project going with
that's
just being an engineer and modifying your project.
Yeah. So, Maddie, did you use any type of journal or sometimes when I was teaching, especially the engineering at first, kids had a hard time coming up with like, how do you make it better? Everything's already been invented. So, how did you do that process to make them feel like they could engineer the world's best glider?
Absolutely. So we really honed in on the idea of engineers are people that make mistakes, and we celebrate these mistakes by recording everything that worked and everything that didn't work, and building off of those ideas. And so we had this ideas engineering journal where any modification that they made, they had to record it down with a diagram, and they had to label their diagram, put anything new that they added to it, and then write down what worked, what modifications are you going to keep, which ones are you going to kick out, and see if you are going to build on this modification for further gliders that you want to make.
What were students' responses to that? Did they seem to enjoy that process?
They One student said that it was a lot of writing, which it is. It is a lot of writing, a lot of recording your data, self recording data, which is something that second graders I don't think get too much practice of. But it was a great introduction to real life situations where you need to record what works and what doesn't, and build off of your ideas to make your best project. And so a lot of writing was was some of the students' responses, but it also helped the students stay organized. And I think with that organization, the students felt like they had ownership of their projects, that they could see the progression, where they started and where they ended.
Right. Maddie, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I've used that ideas journal, and it just kind of prompts the kids into thinking out of the box and starting to develop those. Wait a minute, maybe I can change this, or maybe I can change the shape or the weight. And kids really sometimes need that initial little guidance on there. So, how did that lead into the phenomena that you're going to present?
Um, well, we first started off by saying, there's all these different types of engineers, and we focused in on the aerospace engineer, and we took off our aerospace engineer caps, and we kind of moved into civil engineers, and we explained that a civil engineer is a person that designs and maintains roads, bridges, dams, and similar structures. So what led the students into this investigation was we presented them with this video of a house on a sandy hill, and we had a water cup poured directly into the pathway of the house that was made out of Legos. And they saw, as more water came through to the house, that a natural river was beginning to form. But with that river, some of the sand that the house was built on was beginning to erode. And so some of the students noticed that this is a problem. And we encourage them to come up with these ideas or solutions to help protect the house. And so that's really what jump started our investigation into this flooding phenomenon.
That is awesome. So that led you into the whole project. That your whole lesson is, I wouldn't even call it a lesson, Maddie. I would call it a unit. And I think that there's so much potential to even take that further out with what you love, with that whole project-based learning and student-led learning. So let's kind of start with, what science standards were you focusing on?
We were really focusing on Earth and space science standards for second grade, which goes into students developing and understanding the role of water and wind and weather, and also how it can change environments and impact human lives. And so we focused on that Earth and space science, but we also realized that this could be applied towards um, older grade standards, such as fourth grade and above fifth grade.
Right. Yeah. I've actually taught fourth grade for several years, and you're right. It dovetails so nicely into those standards, and having students start to explore that engineering process and then continue on into the later grades to where they might end up being a civil engineer themselves. So I know in your lesson you have the asset tool. That asset tool is to help focus in on what students are doing. So tell us a little bit more about how you set this up. You did this remotely, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Completely remote.
That is a feat in itself in today's. Can you kind of take us step by step? Like, how did you do that? How did you get the materials out there? What were your steps to make that so successful?
We first started off with coming up with a list of materials that we thought were going to be the most useful for the students to be able to use at home. And then, with the help of my administration at Berton, we set up this supply drive to where students and families could safely come pick up their supplies and bring them back to the home. And so we really wanted it to be this individual, special project that the students could be able to complete in their own homes or wherever they were doing their learning. And so that really fell on the importance of having those materials in individual bags sent home. And then, as far as getting the project going, we posted a picture of how one could set up all of these materials, or how you could utilize these materials, on my Clever Teacher page. And so the students had access to that And whenever they needed maybe inspiration, or I don't know what I should use this material for, they could go back onto my Clever Teacher page and pull that picture up and see how it was being utilized, and then go from there and build off.
So Maddie, when you first set it up, you didn't just like say, okay, here's how we're going to set it up. Here's what we're going to do. How did you get them like into like using the materials?
Yeah, so the first challenge was really, here are your materials. What can you do with them? I want you to notice what do you I want you to notice and observe what happens when you play around with these materials. Just play with them. There was really no project or goal with any of these materials the first session, which really falls back on my whole love of project-based learning, because so much learning goes on within play. And they really took to that and noticed that, when I use the bigger rain cup, more of the sand goes away. Or when I build a steeper hill, the water goes down faster. They began learning without even really realizing it through play.
And that is the magic, the science, the amazing part of just play-based learning, because students naturally do that on their own. And then you as a teacher get to bring out, what did you notice? What did you wonder? And start moving it into a project. So after they played with the materials, how long did they get to play with the materials?
They got to play with it for a good 4 to 5 days. We sent them home on, or we gave them that challenge of playing with the materials on maybe a Thursday or a Friday. And so they had the whole weekend to play with the materials, and then they got to come back and report their noticings and their I wonder questions. And we got to kind of, as a class, collaboratively build off of what they noticed at home.
Very awesome. So came back together as a whole group. And did you have them write down their noticing or wonderings? Had they ever done that type of open-ended, like, what did you notice? What did you wonder? Had you um, done some of the noticing and wondering prompts before, or was this their first chance?
This was really their first chance. In the past, we've done a couple like KWL charts, which is knowing, wondering, and what you want to learn, but nothing really this hands-on and this big of a project. And so it was really their first opportunity to just kind of take what they noticed and observed and put it out there as like an I wonder what happens if I do this next.
Awesome, awesome. So after they did that initial play, which we'll call it play, but noticing and wondering, what did you do next? What was the next step to kind of start getting to them to think of civil engineering and how to solve problems?
Well, the next steps, what led to the next steps was introducing this book called Flood Warning. And this book is really great. It's an informational text that just depicts floods. And we really wanted it to be something that the children could, or the students could build off of as well. And being in Tucson, Southern Arizona, we get these huge monsoon floods all the time. And so when we turned it back on the students, each of them had their own stories about, a flood that maybe they noticed or that they heard about, or one time when it rained really hard, they noticed this. And so we wanted to make it to where the students could build off their own funds of knowledge and make it personable. And so that book really helped us kind of guide the students' learning to make it more self-reflective of their own experiences. And so that book helped. And then we also went back to that investigative phenomenon video of, this is a problem, how can we fix it? What are some solutions that we can define?
Awesome. So after they initially did that, did they, I'm assuming that you read the books in chunks, or did you read, yes, in small parts, and then had small discussions? What led to the setup and the whole project? When the kids came back together, they did notice those problems, I'm sure. And what were some of the things that they kind of talked about that sparked that whole project, that student-led project?
Well, after looking at the book and looking at the pictures in the book, they realized that, some of the structures that are closer to the running water tend to collapse faster than those that are set farther back. And so that was one of the ideas that the students had come up with, is like, maybe when we build our next modification of this project, that we set the house further back. And so we really, we went back and forth between the book and our modifications, and the students were kind of set off on their own to figure out what was the best the best system for their structure. And then they were able to come back and report what they were able to find. And then, of course, they were using their ideas engineering journal throughout this. And so, again, they had to, record any observations, any noticings, and then and make modifications throughout the project.
Awesome. So I know you did this remotely. Again, hats off to you. That is not an easy task to do. How would that transfer? Like, how could you transfer that if students were in a classroom? Do you think
It, honestly, this project is just so, it could easily be able to transfer into in person. Really, the only thoughts that I have on it is maybe students would be able to share materials. They'd have the opportunity to collaborate more with one another. But of course, if we go back anytime soon, it has to be safe for them to share materials. And so, even though this project was done remotely, I personally wouldn't change too much of it, even if we were in person. I think it works really well both ways.
fantastic? Okay, so you had the students doing this. About how long did this whole process take? How did you come back together weekly? How did you report out, and how did students share what they found was their best engineering design?
So this project took about 14 days over the course of 2 weeks or so, and we really highlighted it in 4 sessions during those 14 days. But with that, whenever we would have this big whole group discussion on what we're noticing, what you're wondering, any modifications that you're making, those were typically done on like a Thursday or Friday. And so the students would have the weekend to go back and make their modifications based on what they learned from other students, or any ideas that they were able to come up with on their own. And then that following Monday, we would have another report out where if they noticed anything else, or anything that they think would be valuable for the other students to hear, they were given that opportunity to share their ideas.
Amazing. I know at the end, and I'm so sad that I missed it because I really wanted to come, that you had this wonderful celebration. Um, Tell me about that celebration, and what did the kids benefit from that? How did their learning, how did you feel like their learning improved? What gains did they make?
Yeah, well, we had this huge project, and we wanted it to come to this, this big bang of inviting families in, and being able to see what the students exactly learned. And so we wanted to celebrate this whole project. And so we had families were invited to join in on the Zoom call. We had, grandparents from Maryland coming in, and it was really just this opportunity for students to feel like they owned their learning. They got to present all of these artifacts and observations that they gained throughout this project, and got to see what other students also did as well. And so, with this celebration of learning, I compiled a whole file of artifacts. And this I really heavily depended on parents to be able to send in video documentation or picture documentation, and email those to me so that I could then put them together in some sort of slideshow for the parents and students to be able to see. Um, as far as inviting the families into our celebration of learning, I put together a very quick flyer, kind of briefly stating, the project, what's going to be happening during the celebration of learning, and then also connected our Zoom link for the classroom there, so that students and families could just click on that link and be able to join the meeting from really anywhere.
Amazing. So a little prep work ahead to kind of make this celebration something that the students probably for the rest of their lives will remember, making that and making those connections with engineering and bringing those families together to celebrate. You had mentioned earlier, that maybe families, they knew that this project was happening. What did parents say after they heard their child speak about?
I mean, with remote learning, like it's hard for a parent to not really know what's going on in the classroom. So they had an idea. I'm sure sand was like being dragged into their homes and water was being spilt. But I think when the families came together for the celebration of learning, they were able to understand all of the learning that was being taken place, because I'm sure it just seemed like kids were building sandcastles and playing around at home, but they were actually learning about how to find solutions to better impact human lives, which is just amazing that they were able to do all of that at home through this play-based project.
Right. So in that, I'm sure that not only did they learn the engineering, the science behind everything, but a lot of different skills across the content areas. What were some of those things that it just kind of it brought the curriculum together to where you could absolutely do this project knowing that you had other standards to teach as well?
Yeah, and I love that when a project is able to cover a bunch of standards, you get to like double, triple dip, and so it makes my life so much easier. Um, this project really fell in line with our writing standards. At the time, we were focusing on informational writing, and so kind of coinciding with this project, I had the students write a report on how to protect a structure from a flood, because they were getting hands-on learning experiences through this project. And so we focused on that for our informational writing, but it also tied really well into our reading standards, which was informational texts, focusing on key nonfiction text features. And so with their writing pieces, they also had to draw a diagram of what was working with their modification and labeling and bold text. And so we were kind of very, very fortunate and lucky to have both of those standards kind of going on at the same time during this project. And then also it could be tied into some of our technical art standards in second grade, as well as our social studies standards that focuses in on community and their own personal lives.
Maddie, I can't thank you enough for sharing such a wonderful lesson. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope that other teachers will benefit as much as your students did from this wonderful sciencing and engineering unit project that you did. Thank you so much, Maddie.
Thank you so much, Sherry.